Oh, good, okay, yeah.
There's no greater satisfaction for a driver than jumping into a car and making it go as fast as it's capable of being driven. It isn't so much the excitement, but more the immense pleasure in knowing you've found excellence. Formula One is the biggest, brassiest, costliest circus of all. The greatest show on earth. Motor racing's Everest. An elite of maybe 30 drivers among 16 Grand Prix teams racing all over the globe for 9 months out of 12 on a mission to win the World Championship. Living out of suitcases with tickets to Rio, LA, Cape Town, Monte Carlo, Monza. 15 or 16 races in all. It's life in the fast lane.
If that's what you think Formula One motor racing is all about, you couldn't be further from the truth. There's much more to the sport than the glamour of race day and the star qualities of its heroes.
Fictional, literary and celluloid heroes can party all night with a bevy of blondes, but today's Grand Prix driver wouldn't last long in the highly disciplined, ultra-competitive world of Formula One. Today, Grand Prix racing is no longer sport. Amateur racers went out with front-engine cars and pudding basin helmets. Now, Formula One is a multi-million-dollar business run for profit.
The Hollywood ideal of devil-may-care races with silk scarves and oil-stained faces have long gone, if indeed they ever existed at all.
There's a commitment to winning never evident in earlier eras, and requiring the assembly of experts in the field of design, construction, commerce and race driving. However, I can't help thinking it was probably a lot more fun in the old days.
The sport, like most things in life, has to begin somewhere. Designing and building a car is one thing, but to really make it go, you have to have a driver who can maximize its potential. So where do drivers begin? What makes them want to do it at all?
There are countless complex and obscure reasons why people go racing. In my case, it was in my blood. My father was a race driver, and I was raised in a motorsporting environment. I started here in Formula Ford, one of hundreds of new boys desperately hoping to be noticed.
It really doesn't seem that long ago when I was in the same position as these lads. The ladder to the top is still pretty much the same as in my day. You started in Formula Ford, then you drove Formula 3, Formula 2, and then with a bit of luck, you finally made it into Formula 1.
Formula Ford certainly isn't the glamour class of racing, but it's great for building character and unearthing raw talent. Surviving on fish and chips and racing on a tiny budget in England's freezing winter isn't a whole lot of fun, believe me. Plenty find it too tough and call it quits. Out of the whole bunch, there's maybe one guy every year who possesses the skills and application to make it to the top.
Of course, however good you are behind the wheel, you won't go anywhere unless you've got it attached to a car. And as a full season in a competitive car can cost you over $80,000, it'll certainly help if you can start with a bulging wallet.
Not every would-be world champion has a millionaire dad or obliging backer to bankroll his racing career. Among the fresh-faced hopefuls are legions battling along on working man's wages and high hopes. Ambition is probably the only common denominator among the well-heeled haves and the hard-up have-nots.
However, rich kids or poor kids, eventually it's ability that separates the winners from the losers. It's out here on the track where that ability and determination to succeed become the point of it all.
The Formula Ford big spenders don't really have a great advantage. All the cars use near identical four-cylinder Ford engines and the same gearboxes and tyres, and they all weigh about the same. Desperate racing is a Formula Ford institution because all the drivers are going flat out to impress any influential team managers watching.
I think this guy leading is showing a lot of promise. He's maintained very good lines lap after lap, even though he's come under tremendous pressure. He's able to keep his cool the whole way, and he's shaken off number two. I think number two's shaken himself off.
Maybe that's what we call 11/10ths driving. Perhaps 1 second in lap time covers the top 20 drivers. It's cutthroat stuff with bulk thrills and spills along the way, like a back alley brawl on wheels. Out of all the chaos comes a winner, a worthy winner. One victory in the Formula Ford School of Hard Knocks won't catapult a driver into the big time, but it's a start. And here's what's waiting at the end of the long, hard slog. The challenge of Formula One. A world of unbelievable pressures with its raw excitement, sobering dangers, unceasing media attention, fan fervour. Yes, some glamour, but above all, the overwhelming presence of the almighty dollar. And then there's the magic names along pit road. Ferrari, Lotus, Brabham, McLaren, Renault, Williams, Tyrrell, and others desperately looking for the same history of race-winning success. Like Ferrari, the most famous name in racing. The red cars have contested more Formula One races and won more than any other team. The win ratio of 1 in 4 is testimony to Ferrari's commitment and expertise. 150 people are involved full-time with the race team. Of course, it helps that Ferrari is owned by the giant Fiat company. For a driver, an offer from Ferrari is a clear sign that he's considered among the best. For a race fan, particularly an Italian race fan, a Ferrari 1-2 at a Grand Prix is sheer bliss. The nucleus of the disbanded Alfa team is this newcomer to Formula One, Euro Racing. It has access to Alfa Romeo technology and uses the powerful Alfa Turbo engine. And there's a fierce passion for motor racing. Maybe, though, the Latin temperament can be a disadvantage in Formula One, where the head rather than the heart should rule. Looks good one day and utterly confused the next. Then we have Renault, state-owned and involved in Grand Prix racing to promote its range of road vehicles. One of the largest manufacturers in the world, with bulk money and almost unlimited resources. Renault's been racing a turbo for longer than its rivals. Its engine was something of an expensive hand grenade for many seasons, and for a team that spends a rumoured $33 million annually, Renault took an age to get its act together. And the signs are that the new turbos out of West Germany and Italy could prove too good in 1984 and beyond. From humble beginnings, Williams has become, in my view, the slickest outfit in Formula One. Williams reflects all that is desirable in a leading team. Meticulous attention to detail, a healthy budget, a brilliant bunch of engineers and mechanics, and most importantly, it has arguably the best all-round race car designer in Formula One. Founded in 1962 by Sir Jack Brabham, who is no longer involved with the team, Brabham is a perennial Formula One force. I certainly rate designer Gordon Murray alongside Patrick Head Williams. He has the same ability to produce a safe and stunningly effective car. team owner, little Bernie Eccleston, is prepared to take a gamble on occasions, and he's more often right than wrong, for Bowden has chalked up a fine record of consistency over the years. Publicity-conscious British team McLaren is all professionalism. It too operates on a handy budget, which it uses judiciously, delving into specialised high-tech areas such as carbon fibre chassis. There's little doubt that McLaren has happy days ahead with its acquisition of the new TAG Porsche turbo engine, along with the proven abilities of chief designer John Barnard and sharp no-nonsense team manager Ron Dennis, here on camera. Traditionally, Lotus has wielded a significant influence on contemporary racing car design, with a reputation as one of the more innovative of teams. However, I'm not sure it retains a technical edge anymore. Losing Colin Chapman, the figurehead and driving force, was a blow. The last occasion Lotus showed any potency was in Mario Andretti's title-winning year in 1978, although there has been some encouraging signs that a resurgence may not be far off. So much for the stables. Now for some of the jockeys. Here is a look at a handful of the fast boys. Alain Prost. He's looked World Championship material from the moment he burst into Formula One in 1980. In fact, he probably could have twice won the title had it not been for the unreliability of the turbo Renaults. A gifted natural driver, Prost is a thinker and tactician too. Brazilian Nelson Piquet's driving has taken on a new maturity since winning the 1981 World Championship. Very quick, cool and methodical, he has the ability to extract the best from any car. Keke Rosberg, signing on with a hot outfit like Williams in 1982, did wonders for the Fighting Finn, who went from nowhere to world champ in 12 months. Keke's quick, bold and spectacular. Little Renianu, greased lightning in qualifying, but often ragged during the race itself. Patrick Tambay, with a head like that he could be in Hollywood, which is where his rivals would like him to go and stay. Patrick's one of the best, smooth, fast and safe. Austrian Niki Lauda has 2 world titles in his kit bag. Ruthless and remote, he's not the quickest driver around, but he's probably the smartest. American Eddie Cheever is no slouch either. Only in his mid-20s, Big Eddie was snapped up by Renault in 1983 as a marketing ploy to promote sales in the United States. Formula One, for all its obvious signs of prosperity, has a very definite pecking order, starting at the top with the high rollers like Renault, Ferrari, Williams, Brabham and McLaren. These haves are either the racing division of a big vehicle manufacturer or else a team supported by big dollar sponsorship, or both. But down at the other end of the grid, you'll find a handful of teams, the have-nots, doing it tough, particularly later in the season when small budgets have been stretched thin or gobbled up by the mind-boggling costs. Teams come and go, just as drivers come and go. A modest team like Arrows has to scrape by on a comparatively meagre budget of around $2 million a year. With a minimal staff of 40 full-timers, Arrows can't afford to pay big retainers to star drivers. At the other end of the scale, there's McLaren. The budget size isn't public, but $10 million is an educated guesstimate. McLaren has 80 or 90 boffins beavering away at its factory. Imagine the weekly wage bill. There's maybe a dozen engines, each carrying a price tag of between $70,000 and $130,000. And those engines must be overhauled every 1,000 kilometres at a cost of $10,000 for the rebuild. The cash register at a Formula One team just keeps on ticking over. Toiling behind locked doors are engineers piecing together the latest prototype in absolute secrecy. In the design office, 5 or 6 smarties are probing away for that elusive breakthrough that could give the team the edge. A complete Grand Prix car is valued at more than $250,000, and of course, some are even obsolete before they've turned a wheel. One expendable that doesn't hurt the team's budget is tyres. Competition between the tyre brands is fierce, and the race teams have contracts with Goodyear, Michelin or Pirelli to supply at no cost virtually unlimited quantities with a choice of several compounds of qualifying and race tyres. With precious reputations and massive amounts of money riding on Grand Prix races, opposing factions pitch blatantly for a slice of the action behind the scenes. The Kremlin has nothing on the political intrigue in Formula One, where rampant nationalism is another of the prime motivating factors among the manipulating big-time operators. Formula One is like an empire ruled by two opposing powers that have until recently allowed politics to disrupt the sport. On one side, we have FISA, the Fédération Internationale de Sport Automobile. FISA is based in Paris and has a distinctly French bias. Grand Fromage of FISA is the president, Monsieur Jean-Marie Balest. He is determined to see fair play for the good of le sport and la belle France. On the other side, we have the Formula One Constructors Association, FOCA for short. Big cheese of FOCA is Bernie Eccleston, determined to see fair play for the good of the sport and FOCA supporters, who happen to be the smaller and mostly British teams. Apart from national pride, the two organisations very rarely see eye to eye on the way motor racing should be run. FISA writes the rules, but FOCA pulls the purse strings. So the struggle for ultimate control usually results in an untidy stalemate. Really what it's all about is money, big money. You see, running parallel with the World Driving Championship is the Constructors' title, which is based on the same points system, 9 for a win, 6 for second, 4th for third, and so on for each race. It's a very big deal. The team's points tally each season relates directly to the amount of money it will receive from the not unsubstantial FOCA kitty. That's why the interpretation of the rules takes on such a serious tone. A point earned is money in the pocket. Look anywhere at a racetrack and you'll see money changing hands. There are plenty of people in for a slice of the dollar action. Every billboard and every man, woman and child through the front gate represents money in the pocket of the circuit promoter. He needs a swag of dollars to break even because FOCA, the Formula One Constructors Association, asks and gets about $2 million from any race promoter wishing to stage a Grand Prix. Still more of his money goes towards publicising the big race. However, the incredible cost of staging a Grand Prix can be defrayed by going to an outside sponsor to back the meeting in return for the naming rights. Hence, the Toyota US Grand Prix West or the Marlboro British Grand Prix. The cost to each of these companies a trifling few $1 million apiece. Further down the line, behind the grandstands, you'll find more horse trading, though on a much smaller scale. There are food stalls swapping coins and notes for a full belly, and a tent city flogging off merchandise and souvenirs in the colours of the different teams. Items ranging from cheap trinkets, like key rings, right through to $100 jackets. Go to any Grand Prix circuit and the story is the same, only the language and the currency is different. This is what really makes it all worthwhile for the real big spenders, the race team sponsors. Television. Every Formula One race is beamed to 38 countries for a viewing audience of 90 million people. That translates to a total of 1,440 million viewers per season. This saturation television exposure justifies the sponsor's big splurge. One point here, the racetrack promoters can't sell off television rights because Bernie and FOCA have that one tied up. Formula One drivers play for high stakes, high risks for high rewards. The top half dozen or so superstars receive 7-figure retainers. They're the fortunate ones, for there are plenty who earn nothing like those big amounts, and still more who don't receive any payments at all. Some drivers actually have to pay the poorer teams for the privilege of racing a Formula One car. They're scathingly referred to as renter drivers. There's an obvious reason why drivers are well paid, and it needs no real comment from me. It would be fair to say that most Formula One drivers are happy to sell their bodies. If I give you an indication of what sort of money personal sponsorship is worth, you'll understand why. Starting at the top, a particularly expensive area, because it's the most visible part of the driver whilst he's in the car. For instance, I've known this area to be worth over $200,000. And what happens when the helmet comes off? No problem. We've got the cap. Very popular with tyre and oil companies. Moving down, there's the collar.
There's just enough room for a small brand label belonging to a food company or chocolate manufacturer. It's worth about $15,000. Plenty of room on the chest for sponsors. For instance, here we could have a world-famous watchmaker, cigarette manufacturer, or an expensive aftershave. These could add up to anything between $50,000 and $150,000. Even the arms are worth good money. There's enough room on each one for 2 or 3 fair-sized badges, and these work out at about $40,000 in total. So, altogether, a top driver can earn in excess of $400,000 a year by being a billboard. And who pays for the billboard's helmet and overalls? Well, one thing I can tell you, it certainly isn't the driver.
Today's Formula One cars are incredibly sophisticated projectiles, and every year some smarties will come up with a clever new design feature that will send all the other designers running helter-skelter back to their drawing boards. In the meantime, rival team managers will try to get the new idea banned to give themselves time to catch up.
It's all part and parcel of the Grand Prix game, and it's one of the reasons why it's so exciting. You just never know what'll happen next. However, before we go any further, to help put things into perspective, we'll look at 3 cars which in themselves represent race-winning developments over the last 30 years. This car brings back fond memories to me. It's a Maserati 250F, similar to the one my father used to race, as indeed the great names of Fangio and Moss, etc.
Maserati of Italy is one of the great names from the golden age of motorsport. The 250F was an engineering pacesetter in the mid-50s, with its 2.5-litre twin overhead cam engine and a compact gearbox located between the rear wheels. The long flowing lines of its all-aluminium coachwork cloaked the heavy tubular piping chassis, fashionable in the race machines of its day.
It's funny sitting up here. You seem to sit on this car rather than in it. It's beautiful though, and it represents the sort of thinking that went into the last of the front engine races. For a car this size, the steering is surprisingly light. In fact, much lighter than today's cars. Thin tyres and a narrow track gave it a very delicate feel. It's a very fast car though. You'd leave most of today's sports cars behind if you could drive it on the road. The trouble is they'd catch you up again on the corners.
Here's the 250F in action, with the first of the Racing Joneses at the wheel, winning the Australian Grand Prix in 1959. The 250 enjoyed a glorious track career in Formula One from 1953 through to the end of the decade, helping Fangio to 2 world titles before funny little cars with engines mounted behind their drivers started winning all the races.
It's hard to believe, but just 3 or 4 years after the Maserati stopped racing, Colin Chapman in 1962 introduced this Lotus 25. It's just so tiny in comparison. In this car, you're virtually lying down, and as you can see, it's definitely slimline.
Powered by a 1.5-litre Coventry Climax engine, the Lotus 25 was another milestone in race car design. Chapman hated heavy cars and dispensed with the old tubular chassis in favour of a tremendously light and rigid stress skin monocoque. It was once said of Chapman that his idea of a perfect racing car was one that fell to pieces just after it had crossed the finish line.
Now that might be perfect for some designers, but hardly confidence-inspiring for the drivers.
But whatever the drivers might have thought of the Lotus 25, the car was a winner. Jim Clark won his first World Drivers' title in 1963, and at the same time handed Chapman and Lotus the manufacturer's championship. He and the 25 went within an ace of repeating the win the following season.
Nearly 20 years on, and I'm sitting here in my own 1981 Williams, powered by a 3-litre Cosworth V8, employing full ground effects, body design, wide tyres, probably the best car of its time.
Great car or not, such is the swift technological pace in Formula One that by the end of 1981, this particular car was obsolete, ready for a future as a museum piece. Today's Formula One Grand Prix car is a brutishly appealing piece of automotive sculpture, technologically complex with just one simple function to carry out, and that's to win motor races. To give you an idea of what's under the skin of a modern Grand Prix car, I went along to McLaren and borrowed the 1982 model MP4 driven by John Watson.
And this is what holds it all together. It's called a monocoque tub. It's immensely strong, supporting not only me, but the engine, gearbox, suspension, steering, fuel tank, and of course the bodywork.
There's an endless and painstaking campaign to save weight in Formula One cars. This monocoque chassis, or tub as it's called, is constructed from carbon fibre, an unbelievably light yet strong space-age material extensively used in aeronautical work.
It has to be very rigid to allow the suspension to work properly. And very important from my point of view is the monocoque has to be strong and safe in the event of an accident. I think I'd better choose an engine now. Unfortunately, I can't buy any particular one I take a fancy to. For example, if I wanted to get hold of a Ferrari motor, I'd have to drive a Ferrari. However, I can have this British-built Cosworth Ford 3-litre V8, and I can buy one off the shelf for about $50,000.
Way back in 1967, the Ford Cosworth V8 became the staple power plant for the majority of the teams. It's incredible that in such an evolutionary world, one basic design can stay competitive for so long. A fuel-injected 3-litre, designed by Englishman Keith Duckworth and funded by the Ford Motor Company, the Cosworth has won close to 160 Formula One races and produces around 550 horsepower in its current form. I've got a lot of affection for the Cosworth, and not only because I won my world title using it. The Cosworth is the most dependable engine in Formula One, and the sound of the V8 singing at 11,000 revs is like no other. Sadly though, the Cosworth seems to be coming to the end of the line. The 1.5-litre turbocharged engines, producing around 800 horsepower, clearly have the performance edge. On the debit side, they're usually less reliable, can cost up to $130,000 each, and they just don't sound as sweet.
I'll need a gearbox too. I can build my own or buy, again off the shelf, this 5-speed Hewland. Unfortunately, the $8,000 price tag only buys the basic item. Necessary extras, like this gearbox oil cooler, will make the bill that much larger. Yes, these are coil springs, just like on your car. The difference is the suspension system on a Grand Prix car is very sophisticated and completely adjustable to the finest degree.
Now for some tyres. This is what we call a slick. Today, we only use treaded tyres if it's raining. In the dry, this slick provides tremendous grip. Yet so competitive is Formula One that the difference between one slick and another can considerably affect the car's performance. The stickier, softer compounds are great for adhesion, but they wear faster than the harder tyres. Teams must strike a compromise and select a tyre that doesn't wear out before the checkered flag. Rain tyres, with their super soft compound and wide grooves, are designed to quickly get the water away. Of course, there's always the possibility of the weather changing mid-race, and a drying track surface will burn these tyres out in no time at all.
Finally, something to keep the draft out. Today, even fiberglass is considered too heavy for the bodywork. Now they use carbon fibre like this, or Kevlar, an advanced plastic-like material.
The bodywork for this car weighs only 30 kilos, 66 pounds, and is the product of hundreds of hours of trial and error in a wind tunnel, searching for the slipperiest shape possible along with maximum downforce. While a pretty shape is desirable, it's not a top priority. I reckon it's quite amazing how many designers of Grand Prix cars manage to produce machines of stunning beauty when the body must also play such a practical role in the machine's ultimate performance.
Of course, it's also quite useful because it gives us somewhere to put all our sponsors' names.
Right, now that we've got the car all in one piece, we're ready to go racing. Pit a speedy road car, say something like a Jaguar, against any one of these Formula One cars in a lap around a track, and the Grand Prix driver would be out sipping tea before the Jag came into view. Driving at speeds of up to 300 kilometres an hour puts incredible demands on the driver. His pulse rate accelerates from a normal of around 60 beats a minute to over 200 during more hectic moments. A weight loss of 3 kilos isn't uncommon during a Grand Prix, and towards the end of the race, you'll notice the heads of some drivers lolling about as they tire. Some have even blacked out mid-race. To help give an idea of the performance capabilities of these machines, we're going to recreate the first few seconds of a race, springing away from a standing start through a 400-metre long tunnel of witches' hats. Here we go now. Drop the clutch, up to 10,500 revs. Second gear, third, fourth, and fifth. There, 9 seconds for 400 metres, reaching 225 kilometres an hour. Try doing that in the family car. Now let's look at our 400-metre blast from another angle. These things get away like a jackrabbit. 550 horses give a real kick in the tail. See how fast those witches' hats are slipping by. Of course, in a real race, we'd have other cars banging wheels and dodging and weaving for an advantage into the first turn. Incidentally, an average family sedan would take more than twice as long to cover the same distance.
The brakes on a Formula One car are made to withstand enormous punishment. Often we're braking from speeds in excess of 180 mile per hour, and every time they must respond perfectly. If they don't, we're in trouble.
After just one race, the brake discs are tossed out and replaced in the interest of safety, and all the other components, like the calipers, etc., are thoroughly checked. Let's show you why. From a standing start, we'll accelerate up to about 160 kilometres an hour and then brake to a dead stop. Again, taking only about 9 seconds. Hang on. Second gear, third gear, fourth, then third, back to second, first, and a smoking stop. If it's hard on brakes, it's even tougher on the gearbox. A tight circuit like Monaco is a real transmission killer with maybe 90 changes every lap for 76 laps. The good drivers change so smoothly and quickly that it's hard to detect a pause between the shifts. This makes for fast laps, but it puts a tremendous strain on the gearbox. Anyone can push the throttle to the floor along a straight stretch, but the corners are where the skilled drivers can snatch an advantage, taking a deep breath and plunging in faster than the next man. Cornering in Formula One certainly sorts out the wheat from the chaff among the drivers. The physical effort places enormous strain on the neck muscles, and many of the drivers head off to a chiropractor after a race. Silverstone is one of the fastest tracks used in Formula One, with incredibly fast cornering speeds. And like all tracks, there's a right and wrong way to get around it. The guy who belts into a bend with tyres screaming for mercy and the tail of his car broad sliding madly might look spectacular, but he's deluding himself if he thinks that's the quick way. This is how I tackle Silverstone's famous Stowe corner. Coming up is a spectator's eye view of Stowe. It's a fast, flat corner, and even from a safe vantage point, the speeds through Stowe are impressive. And now here's the same corner from where I see it. I've got the car as far as possible to the left of the circuit for the swing into the right-hander. I've clipped the inside curbing, the apex, and now the car is powering out to the track extremity. As suspension and tyre technology have leapt ahead, so too have cornering speeds. Bends that were taken after a big dab on the brakes in third gear 8 years ago are now taken flat out in fourth or maybe even fifth gear. A good car corners fast with almost any Formula One regular behind the wheel. However, an outstanding driver will extract that little extra. He'll brake slightly later, get back onto the throttle a fraction earlier, and a clever driver can manage this while still preserving his tyres. Nothing hurts cornering effectiveness faster than ruined, overheated rubber. Of course, one of the perils of racing in Europe is the ever-present prospect of rain. Even with treaded tyres fitted to a Formula One car, racing in the wet is no barrel of laughs for the driver. 600 horsepower, a slippery surface and questionable visibility is the recipe for high anxiety. A related problem faces a certain ex-world champion, doing his thing for the cameras. There's a certain insanity in going out in sub-zero temperatures, sitting in a puddle of water, soaked to the skin, helmet visor misting over and splashing through the puddles fitted with slicks. Check those bow-ways. Australia's Bondi Beach seems so far away. This is the day it should all come together in Formula One. The day that really counts. The efforts, the planning, the aspirations of dozens, maybe hundreds of people in the team have been channeled towards winning today's race. The driver becomes very aware that this is where his role enlarges. The team's contribution is largely over for the weekend, and now it's up to him. Simplistically, this is where the business ends and the sport begins. the 5-minute board, and finally the commercial side of Formula One loosens up some of its grip. It's all calm inside the helmet in stark contrast to the pandemonium outside. Mechanics, team managers and car designers fiddle and fuss around as marshals attempt to clear the grid of swarms of photographers, pit popsies and backslappers. The driver notices none of this. His mind has already turned to the race. He has noted the drivers nearest him on the grid, dissecting their starting habits and potential. There are rivals to be wary of, those who have a history of banzai tactics into the first corner. Their unpredictability dictates a need for care. Races are not usually won in the first few hundred metres. Better to survive the first corner frenzy and wait for a later opportunity to pass. Pressure and tension mounts inside. One error of judgment today and it's all over. The seconds tick away slowly. The team manager quietly relays any final instructions, and then the driver is alone at last. Now comes the warm-up lap and the important ritual of carefully heating the tyres to bring them to their maximum adhesion for the start. That's what the zigzagging's all about, to get the rubber temperature up quickly. At the same time, the clever driver is bringing his engine, transmission and brakes to their effective operational temperature, anxiously scanning his instruments for any sign of a problem. With the end of the warm-up lap in sight, the cars slow and in their proper starting order head for the appropriate slots on the grid. We're just seconds away from the start. As soon as all the cars are stationary, the red light will be shown. This is the signal to engage first gear and take the engine revs to a predetermined mark for the Demon getaway. The first few seconds of a Grand Prix are crazy and unpredictable. There's all that noise and smoke with cars ducking to the left and to the right, jockeying for a clean run in the mad dash to the first corner. Once safely through the holding the breath stage, it's time to quickly settle down, assess the situation and fall into a smooth, flowing, driving style. There's almost 2 hours of racing ahead. Mechanics work frantically during an unscheduled pit stop. It's a terrible blow because out on the circuit the others are not hanging around. The race goes on. Every team anxiously traces the progress of their car, hanging out lap boards to their man. This information tells the driver his current placing, the gap to the next car, and the laps to the checkered flag. The moment the driver and team dread, terminal car problems and the disappointment of failure, all those aspirations and effort down the gurgler. In the grandstands, the spectators are drawn into the drama as it unfolds down on the track. Formula One supporters are a knowledgeable lot. They appreciate the tactics and the preparation. They're aware it takes more than a big right foot to win a Grand Prix. For some, it's fascinating to note the tactics as the race releases its usual drama. It's like a chess game on wheels. Planning the timing of a stop for fuel and tyres is an exacting science. Even the best teams can make errors of judgment. The unpredictability is one of the great fascinations of Formula One, and so is the slick pick work. Crews can refuel a machine and change 4 wheels in around 13 seconds. You won't get that service at your local garage. Then for Mansour OJ, there's concern when his pal Eddie Cheever doesn't pass our vantage point on schedule. Has he made a pit stop or is it something worse? Back along pit row, crews have a waiting brief. They're not paid to watch the action or soak up the excitement. Their vital contribution comes in this Grand Prix when their race car charges into the pits to take on fresh tyres. A stumble could lose the race. Seconds lost can never be made up. Every driver dreads the unscheduled visit to the pits. It could be a minor adjustment or maybe a tyre change. It doesn't matter, because in his heart the driver knows the race is lost. You sit there and the seconds tick by, and all the while you're aware that the others are getting away from you. It's an awfully frustrating feeling for the driver. Sometimes he has to repress the urge to jump out and fix the problem himself. Rejoining the race, all that's left for him is a long shot at finishing in the top 6 and picking up a valuable championship point or two. The record book will show that the 1983 French Grand Prix was won by Renault. For the winning team, the checkered flag is the signal for a massive release of tension, coinciding with an emotional outpouring of joy. All the misfortunes and mistakes of past races are forgotten in the euphoria of victory. It can all become too much for some who might need a comforting arm on the shoulder. There's not a dry eye in the house. While for others, it's an emotion of a different, less joyous kind. Losing after so much effort is the frustrating, painful side of Formula One. A driver may console himself with the thought that he wrung the best out of his uncompetitive car, but it doesn't mean defeat is any easier to accept, just easier to explain. It's a wonderful moment in the life of Alain Prost, a French driver who has raced to victory in a French car in the French Grand Prix, before a rapturous French crowd. There's no champers for the others, just the bitter pill of defeat to swallow. This time their best wasn't good enough. A team extracts no comfort in finishing second, because being second best isn't what it's all about. It's been a long day, a long month in fact, and these guys are weary and hungry and looking for a bed to fall into. Away at the winner's motorhome, the celebrations are already into swing. But for the others, there's still more work to do before they get out of there. Race cars must be secured in the transporters, toolboxes packed, spares and wheels and tyres stashed away. It will be nightfall before the crew leave the racetrack. Winners laugh, losers make their own arrangements. But for now, proud Alain Prost is the man of the hour, savouring his victory to the fullest, knowing that next time, on another weekend, the odds are that it'll be someone else's turn to spray the bubbly. Well, that's a brief insight to the world of Formula One. In truth, the story is so vast, it probably would require half a dozen films of this length to tell it properly. Even though the teams and drivers arrive and eventually depart, Grand Prix motor racing will go on forever. Whether Formula One will survive in its present form or evolve into something else, I don't know. But one thing is for sure, wherever there's a track and racing cars, there will always be the pleasure of watching a driver reach his peak and drive at 10 tenths.
Hope you enjoyed all the action in today's special, and next Saturday at 5 o'clock, watch for the return of Born Free. Stay tuned now for National 9 News, followed at 6:30 by Ask the Leylands.